Okay guys, so welcome to this part of the ES6 classes tutorial. In this part of the tutorial, I'm going to be going through an additional example. So far, we've looked at a couple of examples demonstrating just the basic class declaration with ES6 in JavaScript. And then I walked you guys through a second example where we create or we declare a class with an additional method. This time, we're going to be declaring a class and demonstrating class inheritance with the super method and just kind of looking at how that works. So I'm going to define a third example here. So this will be example number 3. We're going to be defining a class, or we'll say defining a parent class, parent and subclass. Defining a parent and subclass using inheritance. So for the parent class, what I will do is define a class called tree. And this class basically will have a constructor, as every class should. And inside of that constructor, we're going to define some parameters. So we'll define, I guess, the type of tree. We'll define the number of leaves on the tree. And then we'll define the height of the tree and I guess maybe the age of the tree, perhaps. And then in the body of that constructor, we're going to bind the properties to these values. So we'll say this dot type is equal to type. And then we'll say this dot num leaves is equal to the number of leaves. And then we'll say this dot height. So you guys can see the pattern here. Just kind of doing the same thing that we've been doing in previous examples. Oops, this dot age is equal to age. So we have all our properties defined for this parent class. Now what I want to do is do kind of what we did in the second example, which is define an additional method for this class. So we're going to define a method called print message. This method is going to simply have a message, and that message will just be in the form of a string. So we'll just say this tree has number of leaves. So we're going to say that this tree has a certain number of leaves. So it's going to be this dot num leaves, leaves. And then we'll just simply return the message. Just like that. So we have declared our parent class, just simply a series of properties, values that are accepted as parameters by that class's instance. And then we have an additional method that can be called on an instance of that class, whenever you have a tree instance. Okay, so we've already kind of seen this in action in example number 2. Now what I'm going to do is define the subclass. So let's say we have a class of, I guess, plant extends tree. Okay, this is how we demonstrate inheritance in ES6 classes. So basically I define my class just like normal, but if this class is going to inherit from a parent or superclass, I need to use the extends keyword to say, okay, extend the properties and methods from the tree class to the plant class, right? And then once we do that, we then go into the body of our class like we would normally, and the plant class still needs a constructor even though it's inheriting from a superclass. So the constructor in this case will have all the same argument parameters as the superclass, such as the type, number of leaves, height, oops, that's not what I meant to do, height, and then age. And then we'll add an additional parameter. In this case, we'll say, let me see, we'll say season, I guess, the season of the plant. And then in the body of the constructor, we're going to do much the same thing, except the only, okay, actually, it's going to be different. So what we're going to be doing here is we're going to bind the season to the season parameter. And that's the only thing we need to bind, because what we're also going to do is within our constructor above this property definition here, we're going to call the super method. And basically what super does in ES6 classes, it's a reserved keyword, or it's a function that refers to the parent class. So when we call the super method in our constructor of the subclass, basically what we're doing is we're calling the parent's constructor, which allows the subclass to have access to the parent's properties and methods. So instead of having to define this dot type, this dot num leaves, this dot height, and all of that, we actually can bring all that in by just calling super. When we call super, we just have to make sure we pass in all of these parameters. So I can literally just take this whole line and then just place it in here. And basically what we're doing now is we're saying, please call the constructor of my super class and bring it here, right? Now what it's done is it's taken this dot type equals type, this dot num leaves equals num leaves, and it's just, that's what this represents. So super with all of these parameters passed in is a representation of this parent's constructor and the properties that have been defined within it. It also brings in this method, print message. So it basically allows access to all of what tree has to offer. And then if you want to add additional methods and additional properties, you can do that within the subclass. Okay, so I hope that makes sense to everyone. Now, once we've done all of that, we are pretty much done with this class definition. I'm not going to make it too complicated. So I'm going to move a few lines, and then I'll show you guys what it means to be working with a parent and a subclass. So basically, if we want to log, actually, before we do that, we're going to create a new instance of our plant class. So if I decide I want to make this my plant, I'm going to use the new keyword like I always do. And then from there, we're going to pass in our parameters. So the type of plant that this is going to be is a house plant. And the number of leaves it'll have is 4. The height will be, I don't know, 15 centimeters. And then we'll say that the age is 2 months. And then the season, it's a summer plant. Okay. So now that we've done all that, we're going to log this to the console. So let's go console.log. It's going to be my plant. And then we'll just see what that looks like in our console. So let's just refresh real quick. So we've got an instance of our plant class. The age is 2 months, height is 15 centimeters, number of leaves is 4, season is summer, and it's a house type of plant. Now notice here on this proto, on this line here where it says proto, it's saying it's a prototype of tree, which basically means that in the prototype inheritance chain, it's inheriting from a tree class. So this class is being built or constructed from the tree class because of inheritance. I'm not going to go too deeply into that, but I am planning on doing a separate video on the prototype chain and prototypal inheritance. So I'll go into that in more detail, but just wanted to make note of that here. So now that we've had a look at what that looks like in the console, let's see what we can do with inheritance. So we're going to log to the console a call on this myPlant instance. So because we've demonstrated inheritance between the plant class and the tree class, and since the plant inherits from the tree, we actually have access to this print message method without having to define it in the plant class. We can simply just call it on our plant class instance. So let's have a look at how that works. So if I just simply call this method, oops, forgot my dot there. If I simply call this method on my plant's instance, let's refresh, and it now prints a message for us because that's what we have called our print message function to do. So I hope that makes sense to you guys. Basically, this is just to demonstrate that we have the option of inheriting methods and properties from super classes. We can use the super keyword to demonstrate this and bring in properties and methods from a superclass into a subclass. Once we've done that, we can call the superclass's methods on the subclass's instances. Okay, so I hope this is, this has shed some light for some of you, that you've been able to at least learn something new. If you did have any additional questions, feel free to leave those in the comments. I will be doing a couple more videos around ES6 classes that go into further detail on other things that are important to know.